Good evening, everyone. I'm Grant Cunningham, and welcome to Training Talk here on the Personal Defense Network. This is a show where we talk about you, actually, about your life and how to protect it. In the next hour, we're going to explore how you can prepare and equip for that worst-case scenario and keep yourself and your loved ones safe from harm. Now, we don't do politics or religion on this show, and you're not going to hear conspiracy theories or sort of wacko fringe commentary. Just authoritative information that you can put to use right now. It's the reasonable and practical approach to self-defense and personal security, and I hope you'll find it both educational and maybe even occasionally a little entertaining as well. Now, if you like what you see here, would you do me a favor and share it with your family and your friends and your coworkers and all of your social media contacts? I know that we'd certainly appreciate it, and I know also that they would too, being able to tune into the show on a regular basis and get the kind of quality information that you're getting right now. So if you would, please share it with everyone you know. We'd certainly appreciate it. Now, on tonight's show, I've got a kind of a full show tonight here for you. On tonight's show, we're going to be taking a look at some self-defense myths. I'm going to go on a little rant about self-defense myths tonight. We're going to look at what exactly is a threat. And sometimes we don't really think about threats perhaps in the terms that we really should. So we're going to look at what is a threat. In training tips, we're going to look at what you can do if you're physically infirm, either temporarily or permanently. So we're going to take a look at that. In viewer emails, somebody asked about a gun for a carry gun for an older non-trained person and asked me what I thought about their choice. So we'll get to that email. And in the You Asked For It section, somebody asked, apparently I talked about a defensive flashlight on an earlier show, and somebody asked, well, what makes a defensive flashlight? So we're going to take a look at that. And we're going to look at traveling light as a defensive tool in and of itself. But first, I want to tell you what I've been doing for the last week and why this show is a week off schedule. Now, as you know, we usually do this show the first and third Thursdays of every month. And this month, the third Thursday was last week. We did not do a show on the third Thursday and instead moved it to tonight. And the reason for that is that I was attending the NRA's annual meeting and exhibits in Louisville, Kentucky. Now, this is the annual convention for the National Rifle Association, and it's where they get all of their yearly business done, all that corporate legal stuff that you have to do to have an organization. But the big draw, really, are the exhibitions. And what that means is a trade show. And this is the largest shooting-oriented consumer trade show in the nation, I believe. They say this year that it attracted 80,000 people. I don't know if that's true or not, but what I can tell you is that there were a heck of a lot of people in Louisville, Kentucky, crammed in to the exposition center there. Very, very crowded. And so it was a long weekend. It runs Friday through Sunday, and I spent all 3 days there. Now, the reason I go is, well, first of all, of course, I'm a gun guy. I like guns. I like looking at new guns. But really, the reason I go is to connect with two groups of people. First, to connect with people like you, the people who watch the show, because this is a consumer trade show. Anybody who wants to can get in. And so I end up talking with a lot of people who are not in the industry and getting some idea of what they're looking for and the things that they want and what's important to them. I did get a chance to meet quite a few of you. A number of people stopped me in the aisles and said that they watched the show. And thank you very much. If you're watching tonight, thank you so much for stopping me and chatting for a little bit. And it was surprising the number of people that stopped and said, gosh, they like Training Talk. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I do appreciate that. The other reason I go is to get in touch with some of the other defensive trainers in the business. Now, this is, again, whether they're into guns or not, for any number of reasons, a lot of the people in the defensive training world end up at the NRA show. And it was a chance for me to get together with some of them and swap ideas and talk about things and discuss concepts. And in fact, the result of that is one of the discussions we're going to have tonight about what is a threat. And it was the result of a discussion I had with some of the other progressive instructors and trainers in this business. So it's just a chance to really get together with people, talk with people, and well, I must admit I had a good time too. So that's always nice when you can combine business with pleasure. So back from the NRA show, back on schedule. And by the way, next week is the first Thursday of June. We will have a show next week, and I'm planning on having Julie Loeffler back on the show. Now, she was on the show last time talking about women's concealed carry and women's self-defense issues. We didn't even come close to scratching the surface of that. So she's going to be back to talk about that more. And I did get a few emails from people saying, gee, we'd like to know more about that. So we will have Julie back on the show, and I'm planning for next week. So be sure to tune into that, especially let the women in your life know about it. And if you're a lady watching this show tonight, let your coworkers and friends know about it, because we're going to be talking a lot more about women's self-defense and women's concealed carry on next week's show. So I feel need to go on a rant. I haven't ranted for 2 weeks now, and it's time for me to do a little ranting, because something happened at the show that, and this is not the first time it's happened, but it happened at the show, and I wanted to share it with you. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull this up here. There's a, let's see here. Here we go. I'm going to pull up a screen share here. I want to show you a picture. And here we go. We're going to start the screen share here, and we're going to present that to everyone. Okay. Now, one of the things I did when I was at the show is that I was talking revolvers for this particular company. This company is called Nighthawk Custom, and they're importing these really, really nice revolvers from Germany. Now, I'm not showing this because I want to talk about revolvers tonight, but this is a gun that costs $3,500. They start at $3,500, and believe me, they're worth every penny. They're incredibly well made. But the point of showing you this picture is that I had one fellow come up to me and look at this very, very wonderful gun and say, I'd never use that for self-defense, because if I use it in self-defense, the police will take it, it will go into evidence, and I might not get it back for several years. Now, I've heard variants of this idea over the years before, and it's one of those kind of silly things that we get into in the self-defense world, that I'm not going to use the self-defense tool that I want to use or that I should use because the police might take it and I might not get it back. I've got a question for you. If you're one of those people that believes that, do you avoid driving your new car down the street because it might get into an accident and ruin it? Do you ever think about that? I mean, let's say you go out and you buy any new car, really. I mean, it could be a Lexus or it could be a Toyota. It really doesn't matter. Do you hesitate even taking it out of the garage because it might get wrecked? The idea that you're not going to carry the firearm that's best suited for self-defense, or that fits you the best, or any other criteria that you wanted to attach to it, simply because it might be taken from you in the event of a self-defense incident, excuse me, is as silly as not wanting to drive your car because it might get wrecked. Now, a lot of people, now I'm not saying that you have to carry a $3,500 gun. I'm not saying you have to carry a $1,500 gun. But let's say you've got a nice gun, your favorite handgun that you want to carry concealed, and it's your favorite because it fits you really well. You can reach all the controls without having to move your hand around too much on the gun, and it's got good solid sights on it for when you need to use your sights, and it's very reliable, and it's very efficient in that it doesn't have a lot of stuff that you have to do in order to get the gun to fire. All those things that we talk about that are important in a self-defense handgun, but you decide you're not going to carry that one because it's your favorite, and you don't want it to be taken by the police as evidence if you're involved in a self-defense case. That's where this sort of myth this craziness leads you. It leads you perhaps to not carrying the optimum self-defense tool, maybe carrying a suboptimal self-defense tool, simply because you're afraid of losing it. A self-defense firearm is a tool. It's like a fire extinguisher. You hope, of course, that you never use it, and the chances are, for most people, that you never will have to use it. But not carrying it, or carrying a suboptimal one, or carrying one that's maybe not as reliable or doesn't fit your hand as well, simply because you're afraid that it's going to end up in an evidence locker, isn't really logical. It isn't sensible. Now, a lot of people will have guns customized. For a lot of people like me, I've got tiny little hands, and a lot of people will have their guns customized to reduce the grip circumference, for instance. And this was really common on Glocks a few years ago, but there's still some guns for which that's still done. And you can drop a lot of money into the gun doing that. But do you then not carry it because you put a lot of money into it and you don't want the police to take it? See, it's silly. And this fellow, and he was a nice fellow, don't get me wrong. And again, I'm not saying anybody really needs a $3,500 gun to carry. But if that's the gun you decide to carry, and it fits all those other criteria, that it's reliable, it fits your hand, it's efficient, all that other stuff, if that's what you choose to carry, then carry it. Don't allow yourself to get into the notion that I don't want to carry this because, again, it's going to end up in an evidence locker and I'll never see it again. It's my favorite gun and all that kind of thing. Don't do that. All right. So that's my rant for today. And it was brought up by somebody at the NRA show. So again, this is where I go there to, it reminds me of things like this, things that I want to talk about. So I want to talk just a minute about the PDN, the preferred, I can't even talk tonight. I'm having a great deal of difficulty talking tonight. The Personal Defense Network newsletter. Now, you've heard me talk about this before, the great Personal Defense newsletter. I'm going to bring this screen up so you can see this. I want you to see this. And we've talked about this before. Here we go. And the Wire, the free Personal Defense Network newsletter. And if you go to the Personal Defense Network site and this will pop up, you'll see this, and you can just sign up. It's free. See this sign up thing? Just sign up. It's free. And it comes out every week, and you get a lot of great stuff, the latest training videos, feature articles, hot topics, and more. And we'll just click send that away. If you click and send that away and you still want to sign up, just go. There's one right there. You can sign up in the middle of the page. You can sign up right here at the bottom of the page. There's lots of ways to sign up. And you'll be joining over the little sign that comes up says that it's 288,000 other people. It's actually over 300,000 people now that are getting all of this great information every week. And you can too. Just sign up. It's easy to do. If you decide you don't want to take it anymore, it's easy to get off of the mailing list too. We want you to have quality information, and this is a great way to do it, free way to do it, and keep you up to date on all the stuff that's happening here at Personal Defense Network. So sign up for the free email newsletter. Again, I'm having trouble talking tonight. And get that information into your mailbox every week. I do, because it reminds me about all the great articles that are coming out on Personal Defense Network. In fact, one of them I want to very quickly tell you about, and I'm just going to throw this in here because I think it's an important article. I think you should read it. And it's called All Hat and No Cattle by my friend Aaron Israel. And I'll have a direct link to it in the show notes after the show. I'll make sure to get that in there. But it's a great article about, again, some more self-defense myths. The idea that you absolutely have to have a gun to defend yourself, and if you don't have one, you can't. That's silly. Or that if you have a gun, that's all you need, and you can defend yourself because the mere presence of the gun will do that. Not true either. So Aaron does a really good job, and again, he was inspired to write this at the NRA show. So check that out. It's on the site. Just go to, if you're on the site, go to blog and just hit the blog, and it will come up. It's one of the first articles. And again, I'll have a direct link to that in the show notes. Okay. Great article by Aaron Israel. I really liked it. Okay. So we had this discussion, at the NRA, as I said a little earlier, and the idea of what is a threat. And this idea came from a talk that I had with one of our newest Personal Defense Network contributors, Joshua Gideon, who runs No Soft Targets in Indiana. Now, Joshua comes from an executive protection career, and he looks at things from an executive protection standpoint, and they sometimes look at things differently than we do. And this discussion came about as we were sitting at the NRA show, and we were actually sitting in the press room, and we'd walked into the press room together, found a place to sit, sat down, and the discussion started about why I was the one who picked where to sit, and the discussion about why I picked the area that I did. Now, a lot of people will go into, say, a restaurant or something, and they'll sit in the back of the restaurant with their back towards the wall and their face towards the door so they can see everything that's coming in. Well, that's great if your definition of a threat is a bad guy with a gun. It may not always be. And this idea of a threat goes beyond just the bad guy who wants to attack you, because anything that can result in your death or in your injury is a threat. And that doesn't have to be another person. Of course, it can be an animal. In a rural area, it might be an animal, or it might be a fire. Fires are actually very common. And the question is, if you're sitting in that restaurant and you're sitting in the back corner, are you in a position to get out if a fire breaks out? Now, again, Joshua and Julie Loeffler, who was on the show last week, and I went to dinner with the executive director here at Personal Defense Network, Rob Pincus, while we were in Louisville at the NRA show. And we went to this restaurant, and it was it was laid out kind of strangely. It was in a very old building, and it was sort of long and narrow. The restaurant ran the full depth of the building, but it was, perhaps maybe 30 feet wide, 35 feet wide in places. And it was just like a long corridor. And I was actually getting a little nervous because the kitchen was in the middle of this long corridor that we were walking down. And I realized that if there was not a back exit to this place as we were going down this long sort of corridor-like restaurant, the kitchen being in the middle, if there were a fire in the kitchen, it might block our ability to get to that door, to get out. And so I was looking for another exit as we passed the kitchen. And luckily I found not one, but there were actually two in that restaurant. So the idea that a threat has to be a person, if you're really concerned about your personal security, your personal safety, you have to look beyond just the guy with the gun or the guy with the knife, the mugger or the carjacker. Threats can be anything. And you need to think about, for instance, positioning when you go into a restaurant or into a store. What are the threats that might occur to you there that aren't another person? And how does your positioning in that restaurant affect your ability to defend yourself from that threat? Here in the Pacific Northwest, for instance, we have to worry about earthquakes. We're in an earthquake zone, and earthquakes happen fairly frequently here. And we're due for the big one any day now. And so when I go into a restaurant or sometimes even a store, I'm thinking in terms of where would I go if I suddenly felt tremors? If the earthquake hit now, where would I go? What would I do? How would I give myself the best chance of coming out of that incident unscathed? And so I think about threats in terms of, again, in terms of earthquakes, fires, all of these things. If you're in an outdoor restaurant, where there's outdoor seating, are you on a street? Could a threat be a car veering off the street and onto the sidewalk and into your nice little sidewalk eating area? Happened in Las Vegas not too long ago. And whether from intoxication or simply falling asleep at the wheel, that's a hazard too. Thinking about that ahead of time. Where do you go if that happens? What is the protection afforded you by your environment? All of these things factor in to your self-defense, because all of these things can leave you just as physically damaged or perhaps even unfortunately dead if they should just as much as the bad guy with the gun shooting you. So when you're thinking about threats, think beyond this idea of just the guy with the gun. Think in terms of what you're going to do to defend yourself against things that might not be so personal. And that also means, by the way, carrying a medical kit wherever you go. And I know you've heard me preach about that before, but you should carry a medical kit wherever you go, because the medical kit is one of those few self-defense tools that is applicable over a very, very wide range of circumstances, a very wide range of threats. So carry that medical kit and think about threats in a different light than you have before. All right, I want to talk just a second here about Personal Defense Network Premium membership. And the Personal Defense Network, if you've been on the site, you've looked at the site, you've probably seen all the great free videos and free articles and all that kind of thing. But what you might not be aware of is that the Personal Defense Network is so much more. There is a membership side of the Personal Defense Network site, and you can become a member. Now, on the premium membership side, there are longer videos and exclusive articles and all kinds of things that you don't get on the free side of the site. And even though we've got just a ton of stuff on the free side, lots of great articles, lots of great videos, there's even more on the membership side of the site. Now, premium membership here at Personal Defense Network is usually $39.95 a year. And there are thousands, tens of thousands of people who are signed up for premium membership and getting a lot out of it. I've been signed up since the beginning, and quite frankly, I haven't seen everything there. There's just a great collection of stuff to go through. So $39.95, but there's a deal. Excuse me. The management here at Personal Defense Network said that I could offer you your first year's membership for only $10 if you simply put in the code GRANT10 when you check out. Now that's GRANT, the numbers 1 and 0, GRANT10 in the coupon box when you check out, and that will give you your first year of premium membership here at Personal Defense Network for only $10. And that's something like 70. I'd have to go back and calculate again, but it's like 72% off or something crazy like that. So Personal Defense Network Premium membership, your first year for only $10. If you simply put in the code GRANT10, G-R-A-N-T, and the numbers 1 and 0, all one word, when you check out. So it's a great way to try if you're maybe a little unsure. It's a great way to try premium membership at very little cost to you. You'll get a tremendous amount out of it. And again, it's unlimited. You can watch all the videos and things that you want, and take advantage of all that terrific information that comes with a premium membership here at Personal Defense Network. So check that out. Premium membership, only $10 your first year. GRANT10 is the code. All right. I want to take a look at, in the training tips subject, I want to read you an email, because this training tip came in as an email or actually, excuse me, not an email, but a comment on one of our past episodes. And I'm going to scroll down here so I can read this to you. And a fellow wrote in, he says he's 59 years old, which is just a few years older than me. And I've had surgery for left knee repair, 2 left elbow repairs with diseased tissue removed, and now may be facing left thumb repair surgery. Wow, that's he's gone through a lot lately. He says he tries to go to the gym 3 times a week, focusing workouts on strengthening my left side. And he says he can only nail down on his right knee, and he struggles to stand up. He normally carries a .40 Smith & Wesson caliber gun, which he shoots right-handed only now because of the problems with his left side. He said, if he wants to shoot with his left hand, he has to shoot reduced caliber. And on top of it all, he has heart and balance issues. He says, any suggestions for additional training or tactics that I can use for personal defense? Okay. Wow, that's quite a bit to bite off and chew. Having that kind of limitation can be very disheartening, and it can leave you feeling very vulnerable, and I understand that. But there are some things that you can do. The first thing I'm going to suggest, just right off the top, is that and I'll address this to him, you should probably consider giving up that 40 caliber Smith & Wesson handgun that you're carrying and instead get a 9mm. They are substantially easier to shoot, particularly when, like this fellow, he may have to be shooting with his strong hand only because his weak side is impaired, and he may not even be able to get his weak hand on the gun. And even if he does, it's probably not going to give him a whole lot of advantage. Shooting 40 Smith & Wesson one-handed is substantially more difficult than shooting a 9mm, and for no good advantage. There's really no advantage to carrying a 40 Smith & Wesson. The 9mm has, by all the best data that we can find, from the FBI all the way down to independent research that's been done, realistically, the 9mm with modern hollow point ammunition is at least as effective as the 40 Smith & Wesson. The 40 Smith & Wesson, on the other hand, has substantially more recoil, and it's a much sharper recoil. So I would first suggest taking a look at that, getting a gun that you can actually shoot one-handed with your strong hand and still be effective and efficient with it. Now, that left side, that weak side, can still do things like using a defensive flashlight. And we're going to talk about flashlights a little later rather. But it can still be doing things like that to aid you in your defensive response. Your left side isn't out. It may not be very good for shooting, but it can still contribute by doing things like carrying the flashlight. So that's number one. Get rid of that 40 Smith & Wesson, get a 9mm that's easier to shoot. Now, in terms of training and practice, of course, I'm going to suggest shooting one-handed, which it sounds like you're already doing, but I will just reiterate for the folks listening that that's something you should probably do. If you have an injury to your weak side and you have to shoot strong hand only, maybe that should be part of your practice. And in fact, for most people, I suggest that at least 10% of their practice be strong hand only. It's not necessarily because you're injured or have an infirmity there, but again, doing things like opening a door or holding a cell phone or holding a flashlight, or sweeping your child out of the way. There are lots of reasons why you might want to shoot one-handed, and this infirmity is yet another one. So I certainly suggest practicing one-handed shooting more often if you're not already. In terms of the heart and balance issues, that kind of thing, what I would suggest is, first of all, make your practice sessions shorter and not stress yourself. Things, of course, get worse, and your shooting gets worse, your gun handling, all those things get worse as you push yourself. So make your practice sessions a little shorter. Don't stress yourself. I wouldn't worry, quite frankly, about if you're worried about doing some choreographed practice drill where you have to kneel down and shoot around a barrel or something like that. I would just eliminate that from your practice session. I don't think that's necessary. We just don't see a lot of that in private sector self-defense. I don't think it's an important thing to practice. And again, don't stress your knee. I would certainly suggest working on things like intermediate force options. For instance, do you carry pepper spray? Not every situation is a shooting situation, and having an intermediate force tool that doesn't require you to automatically go to the gun is always a good idea for everybody, and particularly if you're a little infirm. You may not be able, for instance, to diffuse a situation by walking away quickly. That may not be in your repertoire because of mobility issues. So think also in terms of that intermediate force option. I think that's going to be important. Overall, I think, of course, the whole idea of maybe hand-to-hand stuff is out, but I think that one of the things that you should consider is some training in what to do if you're forced to shoot from a disadvantaged position. Now, there are lots of good trainers out there. If you take a look, if you go to the combatfocusshooting.com website and take a look at the schedule there and look for one of their advanced pistol handling classes. Now, you will need to, there's some prerequisites to that. Check those out to make sure you have them. But the advanced pistol handling course from that organization gives you a lot of practice in drawing your gun and shooting from a disadvantaged position. If you have balance issues and you have strength issues, you may end up having to draw either from, say, a seated position because you're not up and walking around, or you may get knocked down and need to draw from a disadvantage, draw and shoot from a disadvantaged position. Now, you'll need to let your instructor know up front that you have these issues, that you're not going to be training as hard as the other folks that are going to be there. But I think learning how to do that and how to do that safely and efficiently, if you've got balance issues and you've got strength issues on one side that might result in you, as I say, either being seated a lot of the time or getting knocked down, I think that might be an important part of your training. Other than that, I don't think there's really anything special you should be doing. I think you should be making your practice regular, make it in bite-sized chunks, don't wear yourself out, and consider getting that additional training in the kind of shooting situations that you might find yourself in, those realistic things. If you spend most of your time sitting because of the balance issues, drawing a gun, for instance, if you're in a car or in a chair someplace, is a skill that you need to learn. And I would heartily suggest that. So intermediate force options, regular but regular but easy practice sessions, getting that 9mm instead of the 40 Smith & Wesson, and considering taking some courses where you can learn to draw from those disadvantaged positions, probably the best thing I think you're going to do. So I hope you mend soon, that you get your strength back, and so that you can come back and enjoy life to its fullest again. It sounds like you're going to the gym, strengthening yourself, and lots of surgeries and that kind of thing. So stay on the mend and think in terms of easy practice sessions, and again, getting that 9mm and maybe some practice in disadvantaged positions. So hope that helps. And so in training tips, physical infirmities and what you should do. So one of the viewer emails I got, and I'm going to go back down here and read this one to you. Okay, he said, first of all, he says, I would appreciate your addressing defensive needs of an increasingly large part of the population. Those of us over 50, that's me, who have a limited physical ability. Now, thankfully, that's not me yet. It's one thing to preach get off the X, but if you worry about falling when going backwards or sideways, it's hard to concentrate on marksmanship. Add the stress of combat, I'm afraid that the wheels may fall off, so to speak. Could you include a seniors segment frequently? And this is from a comment on one of the shows from Bruce Bean. Sure, Bruce. In fact, consider this the first senior segment, because he goes on to ask the question. He says, with the above in mind, would you address my current leaning toward choosing a Walther PK380 for concealed carry? It fires from a locked breech, not blowback, which reduces recoil. The full-size grip and handle should make it more controllable versus one of the very small 380s. And with DRT or critical defense ammo, would this be a good choice for a 70-year-old plus guy with little to no experience or training? Now, this is an important thing. Little to no experience in training. Thanks, Bruce. Short answer, no. Oh, you want a longer answer? Okay, here's a longer answer. The Walther PK380 is a great gun. It's very well made, but it is also of a type that I really don't like for most people, particularly those who don't have a lot of experience or training. Now, the PK380 is a traditional double action, single action gun, and that means that the first shot from the gun has a very, very long, heavy double action pull, and each subsequent shot has a much lighter single action pull. Now, there are lots of people who shoot these effectively and certainly efficiently, but it takes a lot of training and practice to get to that point. Complicating matters is that the gun has a decocker safety level, which is on the slide, which you have to remember to manipulate after you've fired the gun and need to reholster it. And of course, you need to mess with to get it off safe when you draw the gun. And I believe it works as a safety as well. At least my recollection of the gun is that it does. And if it doesn't, I'm sure somebody will write in and tell me I'm, full of it. But as I recall, it does serve as a safety. And if you do carry it with safety on now, you have to mess with that. And it's in a very non-ergonomic position to begin with. So the double action, single action guns like the PK 380 are my dead last choice for anyone, and particularly someone who doesn't have a lot of training or experience. I understand the need and desire for something with lower recoil, and quite frankly, the 380 ACP is a good choice for that compared to, say, the 9mm in any given size gun. I think one of the guns that you really should take a look at is the Bersa BPCC in 380. This is a gun that they make in 9mm as well, but they make it in 380. It's about the same size as the Walther PK 380. It's about the same weight as the Walther, but, and oh, by the way, it fires from a lock breech just like the Walther does, but it has it's striker fired, and it has a consistent trigger on it, just like you might find on a Glock or a Springfield XT or a Smith & Wesson M&P. That's the easiest gun to learn how to use because the trigger is very consistent. It's not terribly heavy. The first shot on that Walther is going to be very heavy, and the trigger on the BPCC is not all that heavy. The gun is very pleasant to shoot. I've shot it in 9mm, and it's wonderful. And in 380, it would be a dream. I've had students with them in class. They've held up fairly well. I do occasionally hear of some issues with them, but then again, I hear of issues with the Walther PK 380 as well. I think the Bersa is probably a better choice for you, Bruce, and I would suggest loading it with either Spear Gold Dot or Hornady XTP ammunition. I favor the Hornady in this particular case because I think it's a little better performing in 380. I am not a fan of going to boutique manufacturers or smaller manufacturers for my defensive ammo. I really want someone who has experience making defensive ammo, and preferably one that has a wide range of experience making police duty ammunition. And Spear and Hornady, I think, both do. So Hornady XTP, you can get that. That's readily available, or the Spear Gold Dot, which is also readily available and has a really good track record. Those would be my choices in ammunition. And in the Bersa BPCC 380, I think it would be a wonderful shooting gun, and it would be a much better choice than that Walther. Or I think the Germans actually pronounce it Walther. Sorry for any of the German-speaking people in the audience. But so that's our senior segment for today, courtesy of Mr. Bruce Bean, who asked a great question. And Bruce, I hope that helps you out there. All right, let's see here. What's up next? Oh yeah, the Personal Defense Network Spring Training Tour is in full swing. Lots of classes going on, and I want to take a look at what's coming up for, say, the next couple of weeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up here, and we're going to go to a screen share, and we're going to bring up, here we go. We're going to start this screen share, and we're going to click this button, present to everyone so you can see this. And here we go. We're going to go to training and the tour dates and locations. So this will give us all of the tour classes that are coming up. And what we're looking for here is, go down here to June. Here we go. Oh, it's right at the top. So we have Rob Pincus is going to be in Lakeville, Minnesota, teaching combat-focused shooting here in about a week. And in Onalaska, Wisconsin, he's going to be teaching advanced pistol handling. Now, we had that question a little earlier about shooting from disadvantaged positions, advanced pistol handling. That's the class where you learn to do that. My buddy Alessandro Padovani, great instructor, wonderful instructor. Ollie's one of the best. Will be in Little Rock, Arkansas, of all places, teaching combat-focused shooting. And my buddy Cecil Birch from Intermediate Action Combatives is going to be in Pittsburgh, PA, teaching his core coursework. And this is his basic course where you learn the fundamentals of unarmed self-defense. And Cecil is a great guy, great instructor, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master, legend in the martial arts training world. So definitely, if you're in Pittsburgh, PA, check out Cecil Birch's class. And on the 5th of this month in Little Rock, Arkansas, again, my buddy Alessandro Padovani, who, by the way, is a great guy. If you've never taken a class from him, you owe it to yourself to do so. We'll be teaching combat-focused carbine, which is a rifle course. And Rob Pincus will be in Searsboro, Iowa, teaching two-person armed defense. This is a new class, and I think this is one actually I want to take myself, because my wife and I are both armed, and we've certainly talked about and brainstormed about what we would do. We've done some practice together, but I would really like to see what Rob has come up with for those people who may be traveling in pairs, in couples, how you protect yourself and how you deal with that. So two-person armed defense on the 8th and 9th of June in Searsboro, Iowa. And on the 9th, and boy, lots of class. Look at this, lots of classes in Searsboro, bunch of them right in a row, clear up through the 12th. So extreme close quarters tactics with Alessandro Padovani, and that's dealing with defending yourself in contact or within 2 arms reach. Rob Pincus is going to be doing a 1-day advanced pistol handling class. Alessandro is going to be safer, faster knife defense. Now, this is Alessandro's own course. It's his premier course on how to use a knife and defend against a knife attack. And this is a terrific course. If you're interested in the knife as a defensive tool, this is the class you should take. Rob is going to be doing two-person armed defense again on the 11th. And Derek Poole is going to be there teaching combat-focused carbine on a 1-day course. And Omari Broussard, along with Alessandro Padovani, is going to be doing the extreme close quarters tactics course again. And then Barrett Kendrick is going to be doing defensive carry 360. Now, this is a class that I'm not really familiar with, but if it's from Barrett, it's going to be, he runs a company called Bear Coke Training. Barrett is a terrific instructor, and it will no doubt be good. I'm going to have to check into that and find out what that's all about. So again, another combat-focused shooting course and combat-focused carbine, all in Searsboro, Iowa. Wow, lots of courses going on there. And in Faribault, Minnesota, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. My apologies to the Minnesotans in the audience. Reality-based training instructor development with Rob Pincus and Barrett Kendrick. That's an instructor development course. It's a great one if you want to learn how to incorporate reality-based training and force on force into your courses. So a bunch of great courses coming up here in the next couple of weeks. A whole bunch of them in Searsboro, Iowa. And I'm not sure why all of those in Searsboro, Iowa. I'll have to ask them why that is. But lots of great courses coming up in the next couple of weeks on the 2016 PDN Training Tour. Lots of great courses, lots of great instructors. So if you're in any of those areas, be sure to take advantage of them, because these kind of training events come along only really once a year for a lot of people. And this is a chance to get them in areas of the country that may not otherwise see these kinds of things. It's kind of like the circus coming to town, right? So you get a chance to see all of this stuff and get a chance to participate and get some really good training that you might not otherwise get if it weren't for the training tour coming to your town. So in the You Asked For It segment, somebody sent me an email and said that I had mentioned carrying a defensive flashlight earlier, and I believe it was in the show with Julie Loeffler, because she's very, very big on teaching the use of the flashlight as a defensive tool. She has a great course called Light Then Fight, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, because that's a course you need to know about. But the question is, what constitutes a defensive flashlight? What should you be looking for? Well, that's a good question. We talk about this a lot, but I don't think we've ever really gone into detail about what makes a defensive flashlight. Well, first of all, what I like in a defensive flashlight is I like one that protrudes on both sides of my fist so that I can use it as either an impact weapon, either like this or like this, as an impact tool. So that's important. And I also like it, excuse me, a little on the long side. I've been trained in Kubotan techniques, so I like it a little on the long side so I can use it for control techniques that I learned in the Kubotan many years ago. That's not absolutely necessary. If you're not trained in those, you really don't need that. I am, so I find the extra length useful. Most people can usually carry a light that's significantly shorter, about like that. It still protrudes it beyond the fist. You can still use it as an impact device. I just like mine a little longer for those control techniques that I talked about. So size, that's important. In terms of the amount of light that comes out, I'm really not particularly dogmatic about that. I like something of at least 150 lumens. I want something that will definitely work to disorient an attacker if I shine it in their eyes. I want to be able to do that. So I want at least 150 lumens out, which is very, very easy to do with today's high-intensity LED flashlights. It's really hard to find one that doesn't put out at least that, usually double that, and in some cases, 7 or 8 times that. But 150 at the minimum in a nice LED light. That's important. One of the things that I think is really important is that, of course, that it have a tail switch. That's sort of number one. But that the tail switch only does one thing: turn on the light. That's all I want it to do. I don't want it to switch between modes. I don't want it to switch between high or low or strobing or SOS or any of that stuff. All I want the rear switch to do is to turn the light on and off. That's it. If it does anything else, that immediately takes it out of consideration for a defensive light, because the last thing I want to have happen is if I pull my light out and I'm using it and I want to shine it in the person's eyes, or I'm looking around my car or inside my car to make sure there's nobody there, that everything's okay. I don't want to push the button when I want high and get low, or when I want solid light to get strobing light. I don't want that. I just want it to go on. So the rear switch needs to do absolutely nothing but turn the light on. That's it. And I want it to turn on to high every time. Now, one of the things that I would like to have in that rear switch, I would like it so that it is a dead man switch. In other words, when I push it on, the light stays on until I let go. Now, this particular light has a clicky switch on it, so I can turn it on. I'm going to turn the beam down a little bit so I can turn it on like so. And I can hold it there, and if I release it, it goes off. But if I press it a little further, I don't know if you heard that. Hear that click? That means that holds the light on continuously. What I want is for the light to come on when I press the switch down. I don't want it to have to go to a click to turn it on. If it has a click, okay, I can deal with that, but I would prefer that it not. Now, I got this one here. This is basically the same light. This is the new version from my friends at FourSevens. I just got this just a few days actually before my trip to the NRA show. And this one has a true dead man switch. When that's pushed, whoa, boy, that thing's bright. When it's pushed, the light comes on and stays on as long as my finger holds it down, and there's no click. It doesn't click on. All it does is go on and off when I push the switch in, and that's what I want. Ideally, I want a dead man switch like that. And again, I want it to come on to maximum brightness every time when I push that switch. I don't want it to come on to low or medium or strobe or any of that sort of thing. So dead man switch is preferable, but as long as it's got a momentary switch that I can turn it on and just turn the light on a little bit like that, that's cool. I'm good with that. I would, again, prefer a dead man switch if at all possible, but I'll put up with this momentary switch. So that's what and of course, by the way, it has to be made out of good high impact aluminum. I want it very, very durable so I can hit it around. Now, I don't know if you can see this one. This one's been around a lot. I've hit it on a lot of things over the years. I've carried this for probably, I don't know, 4 years, I think, and it's gotten really beat up. It's getting a little haggard, and that's one of the reasons I replaced it with this new one. And this one's brand new. I've only carried a little bit when I was at the NRA show. And great flashlight again for my friends at FourSevens, and I'll have a link to this light, my preferred flashlight, in the show notes as well. So neat flashlights. Again, size, if I had one that just protruded a little bit beyond my hand, that would be fine. I just prefer it a little longer. This light uses 2 AA batteries, so that gives me the length that I need. A 2 lithium cell flashlight that's a little shorter would be great as well. So that's what I look like that's what I look for, not look like. That's what I look for in a defensive flashlight. So I hope that answers the question. And so that was, you asked for it. And like I said, I hope that really answers the question for you, is what I look for in a defensive flashlight. Remember, the defensive flashlight is not just an impact tool, it's a search tool, it's an identification tool, and it's a distraction tool. And when you think about all those things I talked about and how they fit into that search, identification, distraction, and impact, that's why I look for the features that I do. All right. One of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight is the idea of traveling light as a defensive tool. Now, the reason that this comes up as a topic, again, this goes back to my trip to Louisville, Kentucky, to the NRA show. As I was in the airport, both coming and going, and by the way, I ended up in 3 different airports, twice each, because I had a layover in an airport, both coming and going. So I got a chance to really observe quite a few people as they made it through the airport. And then again, a lot of people as they checked in and out of the hotel when we were in Louisville, Kentucky. And this was a big hotel. It was very full. In fact, it was completely full. And there were a lot of people checking in and out of that hotel all weekend. And from all this, I got a chance to observe quite a few people. And I'm amazed at the number of people who overpack when they travel. Now, I'm not making any judgments here. If you want to carry everything in the kitchen sink with you, that's your prerogative. But I'd like you to think for a minute about how that affects your personal safety. Now, if you're carrying around a whole lot of luggage, 2 big roller bags plus maybe a shoulder bag or a backpack, think about how that affects your mobility. Your ability to either get out of the way of an accident or an attack, or your ability to respond efficiently to an attack. If you're weighed down with all that stuff, it makes it much harder to move around, makes you more of a target. If I were a criminal and I saw 2 people, one with just a backpack on who was moving smartly through a crowd, and one who had a backpack and a shoulder bag and a wheeled suitcase, or maybe even 2 wheeled suitcases, and I saw quite a few of those on the trip as well. The guy with the suitcase is going to be an easier target. He's going to be much easier for me to attack because he's got his hands full. He can't move as quickly. And so traveling light becomes a defensive advantage. Now, I'm not saying give up your big roller bags. I'm not saying to adopt some sort of Spartan travel regimen, but rather to think about the things that you carry and think about them in terms of how it affects your ability to defend yourself. Maybe, for instance, you don't need 3 pairs of shoes and 2 extra suit jackets. Maybe you can choose your clothing a little more carefully and cut down on the amount that you're carrying. Now, when I travel, I carry generally 1 bag with me, and that's it. In fact, I can go for a week with just 1 bag. Now, I've adapted a lot of backpacking ideas to how I pack, but I can tell you that compared to carrying my roll-around suitcase and a shoulder bag, traveling with 1 relatively light bag is much easier. It's easier on me, and it leaves me more mobile than the way that I used to travel. Now, I'll admit this, concept isn't for everyone. Traveling with one bag requires a lot of dedication and a lot of forethought. But thinking in terms of what you can do without, lightening your load, making it easier to get around, perhaps reducing the size of your carry-on bag by 25% or 40%, reducing the number of things that you carry in that shoulder bag so that you can move around a little easier. All of that reduces your fatigue, increases your mobility, and perhaps even makes you less of a target to that guy on the street who's trying to find his next victim. I don't want to sound dogmatic about it. I just want to throw it out as an idea for you to think about, because I did see a lot of people who were very fatigued carrying their heavy baggage around. And of course, fatigue means that you're not paying attention to what's going on around you. You're more distracted. Both things make you a more of a target than you would be otherwise. And of course, limiting your mobility and your ability to respond. So traveling light may in fact be a defensive tool, one that you should consider. Enough of that. I hope that's, like I said, I hope that gives you something to think about. Maybe the next time you're packing for a trip, think about the things you can do without. You know, it's amazing, by the way, what you can do without when you start thinking about it. I used to overpack horribly, and I don't do that anymore. And, you know, interestingly enough, in the several years that I've been doing this now, I haven't missed anything that I no longer pack. Food for thought. All right. So now, as I said, next week we're going to be back on our normal schedule. Next Thursday is the first Thursday of June. And so our next show is next week, the first Thursday in June, again at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And I hope to have, as my guest next week, Julie Loeffler. Julie Loeffler. She's going to be back again, filling in some of those details about women's concealed carry and women's self-defense that we didn't get to on the last show. And so tune in for that. I think it's going to be another great show. We covered just a lot of ground last time. And as I said, we didn't even scratch the surface of the stuff that we could have talked about. So be sure and tune in for that, Julie Loeffler, next week. Of course, I encourage you to email me your comments at grant@grantcunningham.com. Or, of course, you can leave comments on the show page where you're probably watching now. And feel free to do that, and I'll either respond via email or perhaps, like I did tonight, talk about your questions on the show. Remember the PDN newsletter, the sign up for the PDN newsletter. Join hundreds of thousands of other people who are getting great information every week in their mailbox. So make sure to do that. And remember premium membership. If you're interested in seeing all the great things that we've got on the premium side of the Personal Defense Network website, $10 for your first year. Come on, that's like two lattes. Actually, less than 2 lattes based upon the prices I saw in the airports. Remember, $10 your first year. Use the code GRANT10, G-R-A-N-T, the numbers 1 and 0, all one word, GRANT10 at checkout. You'll get it for 10 years for your first year. And of course, be sure and tune in next week, first Thursday of June, and we'll have Julie Loeffler as my guest. So thanks for tuning in for tonight. I appreciate you being here. I really do. And again, to all those people who stopped and talked to me at the NRA show in Louisville, my heartfelt thanks for doing that. It was really nice to get to know a lot of you and to talk to a lot of you. And I'm glad that the show is helping so many of you become better prepared to face that worst case scenario. We'll see you next week, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, have a good holiday weekend. Good night.